The winds howled through the frozen trees that surrounded the secluded boarding school, their sharp whispers echoing against the crumbling stone walls. The ground was blanketed in a heavy sheet of snow, and the quiet, eerie stillness of the campus seemed to stretch on forever. As the school entered winter break, the grounds had emptied out, leaving only a few students behind, all of them scattered across the vast, cold halls. Among them was Katherine, a pale, withdrawn girl who had always seemed to exist on the edge of the world. She walked through the empty corridors with a strange grace, her footsteps soft against the worn wooden floors. She didn't speak much, she never had. But there was something about her, something unnerving, that made people pause when she passed. Her eyes were dark, and her expression always seemed distant, as if she were thinking of something far away. Something older. She didn't belong here. She didn't belong anywhere. Katherine's story was one that few people knew, and even fewer cared to ask about. Her parents had failed to show up for the winter break pickup, leaving her behind at the school, an oversight that felt almost intentional. When asked about it, Katherine simply shrugged, as if she were used to being forgotten. There was no panic, no upset. Just the same quiet composure. "Are you sure you're okay being here all alone?" Rose had asked her that morning, her tone sharp, a little too curious for Katherine's comfort. Katherine looked at her, her eyes like two black holes, unblinking. "I'm fine. I'm always fine." Rose had nodded slowly, though she didn't seem convinced. Rose was used to Katherine's aloofness, used to the way she was always there but never really present. But something about the emptiness of the school during the break made the quiet girl seem even more alien. Rose felt an odd discomfort growing, one that she couldn't quite shake off. The school was silent now, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Rose, though not exactly friends with Katherine, had spent a lot of time around her over the years. They shared some classes, and their paths crossed often in the halls. But as the days wore on, Rose started to notice things about Katherine that she hadn't before. Little things. The way Katherine would sometimes sit for hours by the window, staring out at the frozen world, her expression unreadable. The way she never seemed to need food, or sleep, or anything that the other girls seemed to require to survive. Rose had begun to feel an odd compulsion to learn more about Katherine, to uncover whatever was hiding beneath her quiet exterior. Katherine was a mystery, and Rose couldn't resist solving it. It wasn't long before she realized that she wasn't the only one intrigued by Katherine's strange behavior. It was during the third night of the break that things began to get really unsettling. Rose had gone to the library to study, though her mind wasn't on her work. She couldn't stop thinking about Katherine. The air in the school was heavy, oppressive, and Rose had to admit that she felt a strange sort of dread creeping up her spine. There was something off about the atmosphere tonight, a dark weight in the air that seemed to press in from all sides. She glanced around the library, hoping to see some familiar faces, but the place was empty. It was just her, alone, surrounded by towering shelves of books. Then she heard it, a soft scraping sound. At first, she thought it was just the wind outside. But when the noise came again, sharper this time, Rose's heart skipped a beat. She stood up, moving toward the source of the sound, which seemed to be coming from the hallway beyond the library. It was faint, like something, or someone, dragging itself across the floor. As she hesitated in the doorway, wondering if she should investigate, she saw something that froze her in place. A shadow. A figure, just at the edge of the light. It was Katherine. Her back was to Rose, and she was standing motionless, her head tilted to one side as if listening to something only she could hear. Katherine didn't move for a long moment, and then, almost imperceptibly, she turned her head, just enough for Rose to catch a glimpse of her eyes. Black, like two pits in the ground. And for a split second, Rose thought she saw something else, something darker, deeper, lurking behind Katherine's gaze. But it was gone before she could process it, replaced once again by the quiet, distant girl she knew. Katherine didn't speak. She didn't acknowledge Rose's presence. She simply turned away, walking down the hall, her footsteps echoing in the stillness. Rose's breath caught in her throat. The feeling of dread she'd been carrying around all day seemed to grow heavier, suffocating her, pressing against her chest. She didn't know what it was, what she had seen in Katherine's eyes, or what she had felt in that moment, but she knew one thing for sure: something was wrong with Katherine. Something was very wrong. The next day, as snow continued to fall in thick, oppressive layers, Rose decided she couldn't just ignore it anymore. She had to know more about Katherine. She had to know what was going on with her. She found her in the dining hall, alone at a table near the window, staring out at the swirling snowstorm outside. It seemed like Katherine had become even more withdrawn over the past few days. She didn't interact with anyone, didn't speak to anyone. She just existed. Rose hesitated at first but then approached the table, taking a seat across from Katherine. "Hey," she said, trying to sound casual. "Are you okay?" Katherine didn't immediately respond. For a long moment, she simply stared out the window. Then she turned her gaze to Rose, and once again, there it was, those eyes. Dark, empty, almost vacant. "I'm fine," Katherine whispered. The words were so quiet, so hollow, that they sent a chill down Rose's spine. Rose watched her for a moment, trying to gauge her mood. There was something in the air between them, something unspoken and unsettling. "You know, it's not normal to stay behind for the break. Most of the other girls left, but..." Katherine's lips twitched into a faint smile, but it wasn't a reassuring one. "It was strange. I don't mind being alone," she replied softly. Rose frowned. There was something in Katherine's voice now, something colder than before. "You don't mind being alone?" she echoed, her heart beating a little faster. "I don't know, it seems a little strange, you know." "You never..." But before Rose could finish, the doors to the dining hall opened suddenly, and another figure entered. It was a teacher, Miss Holt, a stern, older woman who worked at the school. Her eyes fell on Rose and Katherine, and for a brief moment, she seemed to pause. "There you are, Katherine," Miss Holt said with an odd, almost too pleasant smile. "I was wondering where you had gone off to." Katherine didn't respond. She didn't acknowledge the teacher at all, just continued to stare out the window. Miss Holt, however, seemed to notice the tension in the room. Her smile faded just a little, but she didn't say anything more. Instead, she turned to leave. As she walked away, Rose couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She looked back at Katherine, who had resumed staring blankly out the window. Later that evening, Rose found herself pacing in her dorm room. The air in the school felt colder somehow, more oppressive, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. It was then that she heard a noise, a soft scratching, like fingers running along the surface of her door. Her breath caught in her throat. "Hello," she called out hesitantly, though no one answered. There was only silence. Then the door creaked open by itself. Rose gasped, stumbling backward. Standing in the doorway was Katherine, her dark eyes locked on Rose's. But something about her, something about the way she was standing, her expression so still and unblinking, made Rose's skin crawl. "I'm here," Katherine whispered. And as she spoke, the temperature in the room seemed to drop, the shadows deepening in the corners. It was like something had shifted, like the world itself had tilted ever so slightly into something darker. And then Rose understood. Whatever had been lingering inside Katherine had finally begun to wake up. And it was coming for her. The morning after Katherine's strange encounter with Rose in the dining hall, the air around the school felt different, thicker, colder, as if something had shifted in the very fabric of reality. The days were dragging on, and the constant, heavy snowfall only made the isolation feel more suffocating. Students who had stayed behind for the winter break were dwindling, one by one. And those who remained seemed to exist in a state of unease, the quiet tension growing with each passing hour. That was when she arrived. Joan. It was mid-afternoon when the sound of a car crunching through the snow echoed down the long, empty driveway leading to the school. The snow had been falling steadily since the night before, and the landscape outside the windows was blanketed in a pure, almost oppressive white. Katherine, as usual, was alone in one of the school's back hallways, sitting near the large, fogged-over windows that overlooked the grounds. She didn't seem to notice the arrival of the car at first. She was staring out at the storm, her gaze distant and detached as if she was staring at something far beyond the snow-covered trees. Inside the car that pulled up to the front of the school was a young woman, pale and jittery, her eyes wide and frantic. Joan's hands gripped the seat beside her, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She hadn't expected to be here, not at this school, not at this moment, not with all the weight of her past pressing down on her. Joan had run from the institution. She'd escaped the cold, sterile walls and the doctor's harsh words. She had to. There was something wrong with them, something that made her heart race and her blood run cold every time she remembered their faces. The doctors had been nice enough, outwardly calm, but there was a menace beneath the surface, a gleam of something dark in their eyes. They had kept her for too long, for reasons she wasn't entirely sure of but could feel deep in her bones. And then, one night, she'd run, through the woods, through the gates, across miles of terrain until she found herself stumbling into the first thing that resembled a home, this strange, isolated prep school. When Joan stepped out of the car, her legs were unsteady, her hands trembling from nerves. She didn't know what she was supposed to do next, where she was supposed to go, but there was a strange pull toward the school's dark, looming walls. It was as if something was guiding her here, something beyond her own control. She didn't feel like she had much choice. Katherine was still at the window when she saw her, the new girl, standing at the entrance. There was something unsettling about Joan, something that tugged at Katherine's attention. Her eyes narrowed, and she watched as Joan hesitated at the front door, her expression a mixture of confusion and fear. The door opened for her, as if it had been waiting. And she stepped inside. Joan's arrival seemed to disrupt the eerie calm that had enveloped the school for the past few days. Though the snow continued to fall, the air inside felt thick, heavy. The light flickered faintly in the hallway as Joan walked down the corridor, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She wasn't sure where to go, and she didn't want to ask anyone for help. She had no idea what kind of school this was, or why they had brought her here, but something about the place felt familiar, like she had been here before in another life, another time. Her first encounter with Katherine was almost accidental. Joan had wandered down one of the halls, trying to find her way, when she spotted the other girl standing in front of a closed door, staring out into the distance. She was completely still, her posture rigid, as if she were waiting for something, or someone. For a moment, Joan considered walking past, but then Katherine turned her head slightly, her dark eyes locking onto Joan's with an intensity that was both unsettling and magnetic. The silence between them stretched out. Neither spoke for a long while. "You're new here," Katherine said finally, her voice soft but cold, almost like it didn't belong to her. There was a strange, almost predatory quality to her tone. Joan blinked, unsure of how to respond. She had expected to be greeted with pity or confusion, but Katherine's tone didn't hold either. It was detached, like she was observing Joan from a distance. "Yeah," Joan replied, the word feeling too thick on her tongue. I don't know why I'm here.